Hey everyone, Star Knight here. For today's video, we're gonna be drawing a veal baker. We're gonna be baking or slash drawing some hot dudes in a bakery scene. So yeah, I hope you enjoy this delicious meal. Right now, we're just drawing a very rough sketch of our piece. I want to do a scene where the baker is getting ready to bake the dough and a very special ingredient is included in the pan. I just thought the idea would be so hot and juicy. Doing the rough sketch for the character sitting on the pan gave me a little bit of a hard time since there are some foreshortening and the pose is facing towards us. After doing the rough sketch of the character, we are now doing the hair and the clothing. I just realized whenever I make my OC, they always have the same hairstyle and I need to improve and widen my knowledge when it comes to designing the hair. So coloring this piece, I did a very different way. It's not my usual coloring method. I think the method that I'm using right now is called glazing. It's a technique where you first work on a painting in a grayscale and then you place your colors on top to complete it. One of the things I love with this method is it will be easier for me to put the colors later and I will be able to see the contrast of the lights and shadow here. So when you do an in-depth painting, you will notice early on the mistakes and the things that you need to focus on. Because if I were to color this in my traditional way, I notice how I'm too focused on the color, the saturation, and the values of the piece. And I had a lot of fun putting the base and the shading using this method. Ever since I've learned this type of style, I felt like I had the freedom compared to the liner one. But don't get me wrong, I still do line art once in a while. But for me, I just enjoy doing a painting style more compared to it. Because based on experience, when doing a line art, our mind is stuck to just following the lines when doing the colors. So instead of me focusing on the overall picture, I keep on focusing on the line variation and the different section of base colors, so I forget to do the values and contrast when doing shadows and lights. So here, while adding shadows to the hair, I just added some flicks to make it look realistic. With flicks, I mean just flicks of brush strokes. So I just played with light and dark colors while rendering the hair. After coloring and shading our baker, we are now starting with our character sitting on the pan. So we're just adding the base color before we start doing the shadows. I didn't really focus that much on the body since it will be covered later. So I first added the base shadow, then I just used the blend tool. Now I always start with a base shadow since it will help to build the value of my piece. And later I will add more darker shadows until I'm satisfied. And lighting will also play a big role in this method. We are now starting to render the hair. So while I was shaping the form of the hair, I was just doing it randomly since I want the hair to look messy. But to be honest, I should really study more hairstyles. I don't know if it's just me, but I noticed the hairstyle is kinda similar to Juha's hairstyle. Like I can see the resemblance. But I promise this is not Juha. One of the tips that I could give when doing the hair is whenever you do the lighting, I think following the flow of the hair helps with the detail. It will also help with the value. Now we're starting to put the gray colors in our foreground and background. The same I did with my characters, I'm just taking the shape of the object. So when I start rendering and putting the details, I will know where to start. One of the things that I focused on in this part is the perspective of the counter. Because if the object doesn't correlate with the perspective of another object, it will look wonky. I don't know if that makes sense, but I just focus on with the perspective. These are just one of the things that I start learning on the spot. I haven't done an in-depth study when it comes to perspective. For me, when it comes to art studies, I prefer learning on the spot compared to giving countless hours of studies just for a single topic in art. I still study art, like especially anatomy and coloring, but for me, I learn more when I do a piece. Well, since I draw every single day, probably my muscle memory has improved over time. I still have a lot to learn when it comes to art, but all I can say is that I enjoy the process and I don't stress myself too much. It's okay to not draw every day. Like, don't push yourself too hard to draw every day just to get better. We all grow on our own paces and we just need to be patient. And eventually our hard work will be rewarded. At first, I was thinking if I should make the baker hold like a set of eggs, but it doesn't make any sense, so I just made him hold a set of cupcake in a baking pan. So different elements of my painting has a connection. We're just filling the baking pan with some raw dough. And I think this cake will be delicious and fresh after we put it on the oven. Okay, I'm just joking with cooking a human alive, okay? Of course we wouldn't do that. Like this scene is just for intimate and smexy scene, okay? Not really literally cooking a human. Just for the record, let's clear that. In this technique, this is one of my favorite part. This is where we put the colors on top of the grayscale. And honestly, it just made my coloring process more quicker and enjoying at the same time. It's fun playing with the color balance and the saturation. One of the things that gave me a hard time here is making the dough's color very different from the skin. I don't want my viewer to be confused of the person and the dough on the baking pan. So I adjusted the saturation and the hue a lot. For the eyes of the character, since I want the baker to look a little evil and mischievous, I decided to put red eyes on him. At first, for the person sitting on the baking pan, I made it blue eyes, but I felt like there's too much color already, so I just went to black. We're just adding some highlights for our dough and cupcake. And I just kept rendering it until I'm satisfied. I tried my best to make the dough look realistic, so I just added a lot of saturated shadows and the lighting and just played with it. And thankfully the result is quite decent. For the background wall, I just used something from the Clip Studio asset library, so it didn't give me a hard time, it was all smooth. For the empty shelves, I just added some jar with red stuff. Now it's up to you what you think the red stuff is, but for me it's just red juice. I had a lot of fun doing today's video, especially learning a new technique. I might use it for future digital artworks. And yeah, I hope you had fun as well. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and ladies and gentlemen, are you ready?